Good afternoon, everyone. If you're joining us here, it's for our COVID-19 free webinar series. It's day 2 of that series. Today we'll be focusing on business continuity planning. And there's a few of you that we're still waiting for, but I see you all coming in right about now. So hello again. If you missed my intro, I'm Amy Swan with Missouri Enterprise. We are charting an unprecedented course right now with our current health crisis, and we just want you all to know that we are here for you. We will get through this together, even though we haven't done it before. If there's a challenge, I know we all can meet it. Along with this presentation, we just wanted to let you know about a resource that we have specifically geared towards helping manufacturers identify resources, updates, news from the state and federal government, grants and funding, specifically for small businesses and manufacturers, workforce assistance, and more. As the dedicated MEP Center for Missouri, our entire purpose is to help sustain manufacturing in our state. Bottom line, and that mission is especially important today. And I cannot stress this enough, but if your company has needs with materials, supplies, workers, you name it, or even connecting with a state or federal agency, we are here to serve. We have plenty of time following the session for Tom, our presenter, to answer questions. Just simply type it in the chat line if you hover over the bottom. If you haven't used Zoom before, you can type those chats in, and he'll most likely get to those chats towards the end, or questions towards the end. So without further ado, I would like to kick it over to Tom Gordon, who will be joining us from his home in St. Louis, of course, as we're all working from home, to discuss business continuity planning. So Tom, take it away.
Thank you, Amy. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We live in trying times, but let me just read as an introduction a couple of sentences from a very significant book which has impacted a lot of my thinking, termed Resilience by Andrew Zolli. This was published in 2006. He makes the point, every week it seems brings some new unseen disruption, blooming amid the thicket of overlapping social, political, economic, technological and environmental systems that govern our lives. They arrive at a quickening yet erratic pace, usually from unexpected quarters, stubbornly resistant to prediction. What he says is very true. Although it seems that we're in the midst of a unique disaster, we're really not. We can't avoid the tide of disruption. But what we can do is try and build a better boat. And that is the purpose of today's seminar. Surviving and prospering in an uncertain world. And the world we live in is uncertain. What we can do is take steps to build a better boat. So, why worry? Managers and own ability to maintain the ability of the organization to continue and function without disruption. Businesses make commitments to customers, vendors, employees, and other stakeholders. We're seeing employees being focused an awful lot at the moment. 6 weeks ago, the unemployment rate was about 2.5%. The continual problem in Missouri was getting people to work. Now it's about 30%. Now, as I said, all business activities is subject to disruptions, such as technology failure, plagues, of course, flooding, utility disruption, intellectual property theft, death of tribal knowledge, and many, many more. A topical problem at the moment, apart from the virus, is people hacking Zoom. So if you automatically see me with a mustache or a funny hat on, it means this webinar has been hacked. Now, business continuity management is a value-added activity for all organizations. What are some of the benefits? Proactively identify impacts of disruption. Effectively respond to disruption, minimizing impact on the organization. Ability to manage risks and exploit opportunity. Encouraging cross-functional team working, because when the boat is sinking, we all have to do something. It also demonstrates a credible response and enhances reputation in the eyes of a dependent customer. If you are a sole supplier to a customer, what happens if your business is disrupted? You need the ability to maintain delivery. This gains you a competitive advantage. And of course, a business continuity management plan assigns responsibility and authority. Those of you who are ISO certified know all about responsibility and authority. So, we may think our business is very robust. However, as the virus has shown, there's a lot of fragility. I think this is best exemplified by this slide. On the right-hand side, we have an awesome-looking tank. I don't know if it's an Abrams or a Challenger or whatever, but it looks so robust. And yet, on the left-hand side, we have a sole infantryman with an anti-tank weapon. All of a sudden, the $500 projectile from a Carl Gustav recordless rifle makes a robust tank a pile of scrap metal. So, robust but fragile. And most of our businesses are robust but fragile. We talk about resilience. Resilience forces the organization to take the possibility of failure seriously and to accept the limits of knowledge and foresight. No one can see the future. In fact, there are probably several futures, depending upon the plans that you make today. Resilience is not a blind gamble. It's an opportunity. It does not imply circling the wagons and hoping the problem will go away, but it encourages adaptation, agility, cooperation, connectivity, diversity. It can give a big insight into much more opportunity. The Black Swan Enigma. Until people went to Australia, Western Australia, they thought all swans were white. And then all of a sudden they saw a black swan. How unlikely. And a black swan event is what we term in crisis management, something that can either be positive or negative, but is deemed improbable, yet causes massive consequences. The coronavirus attack is an example of a black swan event. We couldn't really, in our wildest dreams, could we have foreseen that? Well, in actual fact, if we had got our act together during the SARS epidemic and the annual flu cycle, perhaps the impact of the coronavirus would not be so debilitating to business. But we've got it. And the trick is to survive this event and possibly even prosper. And one of the things that concerns me, working with several clients, is things are on a downturn at the moment, yes. But once this is over, how are we going to cater for the big swirl of capacity requirements? This is called self-organized criticality. This is what business continuity management is about. And this is the Missouri Enterprise process. Understanding the organization, understanding the limitations, determining a strategy. developing and implementing a strategy, and then of course testing it and testing it. It's pointless creating a business continuity plan, making sure it's nicely typed and nicely bound and putting it on the shelf and thinking, well, that's okay, we've done that now. That's one box ticked off. It isn't. It's an iterative process because problems change. And boy, are we seeing this at the moment. So what we've got to do is try and identify business risks for survival. We must establish the context of our business. As those of you in the ISO world know, context means the sea in which you swim. What is our business? Then we must assess the risk. But first off, we must identify the risks, as many as we possibly can. And thinking outside the box in risk analysis, trying to figure out what black swans could be lurking there in the aviary over the road. Evaluate the likelihood and then figure out risk treatment. And of course, you must do two things. One, you must communicate this to all the stakeholders. And the other thing, of course, is you must monitor and review it. A business plan, business continuity plan, or a risk analysis put on the shelf is no use. You've got to continually monitor and review. So this is how you do it. You start with a strategic plan. There's three legs to the strategic plan in this instance. One is a business continuity plan. Try and figure out where the business is going to go. Things like succession planning, capacity requirements, people. One of the things we do when we're implementing ISO 9000, of course, is a competence analysis, tribal knowledge analysis. If someone has been with the company 30 years and they drop dead, do we know what they know? The second leg is figuring out metrics for success, key success factors, key performance indicators, going all the way down to process measurements for key performance indicators. And the final leg is disaster recovery. What do we do when something happens? The first time I was involved in this was with the World Bank, almost 20 years ago now, on M Street in Washington. We were concerned that someone was going to let off a dirty bomb outside the White House. Do you remember that? We all thought somebody's going to blow up a bunch of strontium-90 or something, or plutonium outside the White House and kill us all. So we had to sit down and say, well, what are we going to do about it? Well, the first reaction was, our Father who art in heaven. And then we started thinking about, what is the incident? What would be the impact? What is the threat? And if it did happen, God forbid, how would we recover? Now, a lot of organizations, big organizations, have hot sites all over the country. In the World Bank, we had a hot site actually in Missouri. So if anybody did let off a nuke, there was somewhere where we could go. However, a plan on its own is no good. You've got to test it. The great General Eisenhower said, as soon as the first shot is fired, the plan is redundant. And he was right. The strength is in the planning, not in the plan. So you've got to test your plan. How do you do this? Well, on a regular basis, every 6 months or something, perhaps you do a desk check, what we call a TWOT, tactical exercise without troops. You sit down and you go through it. Make sure all the phone calls are right, all the phone numbers, all the email addresses. And then perhaps once a year or once every 18 months, you do a partial rehearsal. And then once every, 3 years, 4 years, something like that, you do a full rehearsal. Let's pull out all the plugs and see if it actually does work. But of course, an important part of all this testing is learning. You've got to document what you learned. So let's talk about some containment protocols for this current disaster, because this is why we're all here. You know, we've got to communicate. We've got to have a central point of information dissemination. Perhaps we've got to categorize the employee base into who can work remote, who can go remote, and those whose physical presence is an essential part. So if somebody's working remote, perhaps we establish best practices for remote workers. And most importantly, is everybody must maintain their standards. It's very easy to get lax. I fight with myself every morning. We've been working at home now for almost 2 weeks. I make myself get up at the normal time, go and have a shower and a shave, put on a clean shirt. It's very easy to let entropy take over. Who could go remote? Who could work remote? Have we got the technology, the Wi-Fi if necessary? And what about those who must be there? How do we protect them? One of the things I've noticed companies preparing is a coronavirus response team. Trying to facilitate, prepare the facility. Look at supply chain readiness. Communicate with the major suppliers and customers. The seminar tomorrow on supplier scouting relates to this, addresses this. If we're remote working, how do we keep up to date? How do we keep this social cohesion that we used to when we're working at the office or in the factory? How do we maintain that? Because it's a vital part of making sure that morale stays high. If people don't know what's going on, they always expect the worst. How do you handle snail mail? Do you allow people to go into the office occasionally? Get stuff, letters, snail mail, this sort of stuff. And a good company will create a frequently asked question database so that you don't get bombarded with people asking the same question. And I've found a couple of companies that I'm working with at the moment, they're auditing their plans for effectivity. And it's always a good idea to audit for effectivity. So, outsiders, factory or plant. No outsiders. Clean and sterilize at the end of the shift. And perhaps reduce the exposure by instituting shift work. Because what people don't want is to have to sell the house and car and what have you to keep going. Reduce the exposure, perhaps by instituting flexible hours. One company I'm working with asks people to take the temperature when they're clocking on. It's easy. If you've got a fever, you don't come in. Sanitized containers from China. I suggested this, about 6 weeks ago to a client, and they thought I was nuts. They were expecting a container shipment from Wuhan. And I said, well, look, we don't know how long this virus, which is raging in China at the moment, we don't know how long it lives. Can it survive on the high seas? We don't know. So it'd be stupid just to open a container and unload stuff as normal. What do we do about people who are potentially affected? Well, the supervisors have got to know what to do. The supervisors have got to be trained. If someone comes down with sickness during the shift, and apparently this virus is so debilitating that you can be fine at 8 o'clock in the morning, and yet you can be, knocking on the door of God's waiting room at noon. So you've got to have a process for isolation in the plant. You've got to make sure that you can clean people's areas and tools. And of course, there've got to be a process for notifying their next of kin. On hold, trade shows. Let's not travel around. Training. I'm rather sad because I've had 2 big training sessions cancelled. An APICS training and a supplier chain management training session. We've postponed them. Travel. People don't want to travel around. And company gatherings. Is it a good idea to try and boost morale by having a company gathering? Of course not, because we may kill each other. But what you can do is have online parties. It's also a good idea. And then, of course, the Emergency Operations Centre, so you know what is going on. In this week's Economist, or last week's Economist, there was a big article on how UNILEVER is addressing this problem. And I heartily recommend this article, dispatch from the home front, The Economist, March 28th, 2020. The CEO of UNILEVER, huge global company, he was talking about how they're approaching coronavirus. And it's got 4 basic principles. Look after people. Look after your people. Look after the supply. Look after the demand, and look after the cash. I heartily recommend this article. So, Missouri Enterprise Tools available. I've been handing out a business continuity management gap analysis to a lot of our salespeople to create a business continuity management scorecard. This was something that was developed for the World Bank many, many years ago, and it's still very current. We have got a business continuity and disaster recovery organization specific program, doing the analysis of the business impact. Risk and opportunity assessment. It's also a good idea to continually assess your risks and opportunities, because of course, risk and opportunity are different sides of the same coin. How do we treat risk? What are our options for business continuity? How do we respond? Employees, customers, vendors, other stakeholders. How do we plan and dynamically document the process? So when the first shot is fired, we don't think, oh my goodness me, the plan has fallen apart. We know what we've done. Exercising, testing it, reviewing it, and maintenance. Very important part of all this. So, a basic recovery plan in outline. What does it look like? Time objectives, location, strategy. Dependencies, the internal processes that we have got to keep going. The external processes. The applications that are absolutely vital and the equipment that must be running. How do we make sure that our intellectual property and our documents and our security is not compromised because everybody is working at home? The contact information, internally and externally. It's also a good idea to establish a recovery team, even in good times, because then the recovery team can wade in. You know, D-Day almost failed. And why was it successful? Because Eisenhower and his team had intricate planning. The plan itself was rubbish, but it was a planning process. That means we all not speaking German now. So, creating a recovery team when something does go wrong. What are the procedures? What is the restoration procedure going to look like? How are we going to restore things? And this is very topical in this current crisis that we're in. This crisis will end. You know, it won't go on forever. We're going to come to a state where the crisis ends. what are we going to do with this big tsunami of demand that will come across when the disaster ends? So please, please do not let this be you. I love this cartoon. It's not enough to just show up. You have to have a business plan. Thank you. If anybody's got any questions, please contact us. Amy? We can't hear you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Still learning here. Zoom newbie. I am not seeing any questions come in quite yet. So if you, again, this is your cue to go ahead and ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer. And again, as a reminder, we will be sending you all a copy of this presentation in the coming days. And if you have any other additional questions that you do not feel comfortable asking in this format, simply send me an email. You can connect with Tom, of course, at MissouriEnterprise.org if you, again, have some specific questions to take this conversation offline, or you can connect with your business manager. Tomorrow, we will be here the same time, same place, again, thanks to Zoom. This time we'll be focusing on supplier scouting program and how we can connect you with materials and suppliers in Missouri and throughout the US using our free database. One other note to mention before we end today's call, unless we have some questions that come up in the interim, if you are interested in helping us as a community, as a state, as a country, meet the current medical supply chain gap by either retooling your current facility to produce PPEs or surgical gowns, or if you currently already produce those items but you need additional support, please email me. It's very important that you do that so we can put you on the state and federal list. But in addition to that, I'd like to invite you to an important call that we have with the state and with our federal partners on Thursday morning at 9 a.m., where we will go over some important information and the status on where those medical needs are and how we can help fill that. So other than that, I hope you all have a great afternoon, and please join us again tomorrow. You can go to our website, MissouriEnterprise.org, click on events, and scroll down to the Supplier Scouting Program webinar and register for that so we can see you back here at 4 p.m. Thank you for joining, and please stay safe. Thank you.